Hello, everybody, and welcome to our February session of Breaking the Silence series of Asha USA. Asha USA is a nonprofit organization in Minnesota, and we work with the South Asian community. We do programming, research, as well as education. And this year, the topic we have chosen is stigma around different topics. So today, we are going to focus on special needs. Children with disabilities are among the most vulnerable in any society. They rely even more on the love and care of their parents, family members, and the wider community. As the South Asian community is growing in the United States, so is the focus on the community's needs and concerns with mental health. Such needs often go unspoken due to social taboos, ignorance, and other concerns. The same holds true for issues related to developmental disabilities. South Asian parents face significant problems at the initial stages of their child's diagnosis as they do not know what is autism or developmental disability and what is the impact on their lives. Many of them have never even heard of different types of special needs in their home countries. So today, we are going to focus on the stigma and lack of information surrounding special needs education. We have a terrific panel of experts and parents. So let me start by a brief introduction. We have Jodie Mettee. She's a special education teacher who works with varying ability students who receive support in a site-based classroom. She has worked in Edina public schools for 7 years. She has also worked in urban, suburban, and rural schools in several states. So she's a very experienced teacher in the field of special education. So welcome, Jodi. We also have on the panel Feroza Mehta. She's a parent, an ardent volunteer, and advocate for special needs kids and their parents. Welcome, Feroza. And we also have with us Manjushree Patil. She's the founder and director of Atman Academy, a customized inclusive school for children with special needs, which is commended as the top 10 best schools in India and top 5 best schools in Maharashtra for special needs students for 4 years in a row. She is an advisor, consultant, and trainer on inclusive education for Government of Maharashtra. She has held a variety of prestigious fellowships and awards, and in 2017, she was one of the 10 people awarded US State Department Fellowship from India, as a part of which she came to Minnesota for a year. In addition to that, she has a number of TED Talks, and we are really honored to have here today. So thank you for joining us, Manjushri, all the way from India. So without any further ado, let's get started. I would like to ask Jodi. Jodi, welcome. Can you please introduce the topic or the field of special education to us? As South Asian families, we would love to know what are special needs and what do they look like? How is the evaluation done and things like that?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited and I feel very privileged to be here today. Special education is a very wide field, and there I could be talking for hours on end about about the whole evaluation process. That's just one field, but I wanted to speak about just what you had asked about special needs. What are them? Where we can also special needs, might hear disability, varying ability, because what is disability is saying that the child might not have, may be able, and I feel that it's a varying field. So what are special needs or varying abilities? So children who, you might first see it as children who vary in development from their same age peers. And how do we find that out? Usually, typically, we might see it when we go to the doctor for a checkup. There's multiple screeners and observations that parents are making or might be seeing. One is called a min chat that you take at 3 different times for development, and I think it's like an 18 question screener, and they're for developmental needs. We're looking for how is your child varying from typical milestones. Then so that's when you're very young. It starts like at 9 months, and then 18 months, and then 2 years. You look at those. Then there's also for when your child might be going to preschool. You have it's called Child Find, or you get a preschool screener. And so then you go in before you attend before you go attend preschool in a public school, you would go through a screening process. And that's an area where you might be found that that child might be, varying in their development. And of course, we're always relying on our parents to support, like what are you doing at home? What are you seeing? What is happening at home that we can, provide support with? And that's where you might find those varying developments. If in there those screeners or observations are seen, then we look at an evaluation, and there's 2 different types that you'll see. One is, of course, in the medical or clinical area where you're at a University of Minnesota, or at a medical, like we have in Minnesota, we have a Children's or Gillette, or at your doctor's. They would be able to help support you with getting an evaluation done on the child to support them in that way. And then we look at the educational area, where that's where I would be coming in to help support what we would see for the child. And that's going to be, you would have so in those things, there's a lot of it, there's a lot of maybe varying areas, but so if you have a medical diagnosis or evaluation, that's one area. But when you go to school, you can be then evaluated, and then you're looking at educational support or educational evaluations, which are going to look a little differently in how your child will be evaluated. If you're going to go through that initial evaluation to the public schools, that's the educational team at the school will take over. You'll have a psychologist on board who is going to lead that team to help support the child. It'll be formal testing, which means that we will need to have a signature from the family to be able to go forward. We can't go forward without a signature, because we know we need to follow rights. Then we would, with that formal testing, we want to identify areas of strength, but then also areas of challenges that we might have seen in those screeners from preschool or early on, 6 months, 9 months. And this is where every diagnosis for special education is dependent on testing completed, as well as that medical history. So if you have, that's where we will ask you, do you have anything? Do you have any evaluations? What did happen before that we might need to know? Even like the pregnancy, how was that? Was it a full term? Was there any complications? Anything that's important to know? Even history in your family, is important to have. With that, we could go on to that the 13 categories that Minnesota looks at for evaluations, and there's a lot of them, and some of them are very specific to a blind, visually impaired. Well, there has to be the child is having some impairment in their eye or is blind. As we Siley had mentioned, autism is in there. So if the team decides to go in that direction of autism, there's a whole nother field or another formal testing that will go with autism. Or if we're going to developmental cognitive disabilities, DCD, you're going to look at a whole nother range of diagnoses or evaluation. So each one will bring upon going into and then looking at how we can diagnose correctly and make sure we're following those key points or core features. And that's a team decision. The team doesn't go, it's family, a psychologist, a person who, like myself, who has licensures in various fields, then you can go in and have those people on board. So it's from those 13, we can come up with a diagnosis that can be educationally supported for your child. Is there anything?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. That is a great information to get us started. Even I didn't know there were so many different categories, and they can have dual diagnosis, right?
Yes, there's usually kind
Multiple
of,
diagnosis. Yeah.
you usually have a primary, and then you can have a secondary or even a third category, but usually you have that primary, and that's where you receive the most support. And then if second, you can have, or then it goes again, you can go into multiply impaired, or in different depending on what you might have. And so yes, and sometimes we pick them. You might have a child who is diagnosed with autism, and then later on we'll find that they might have some speech language needs, or they might have developmentally cognitive disabilities as well. So it's we're
Yeah.
always looking.
Yeah, so this is such valuable information. We will come back to learning more about that, but I'm going to go next to Feroza because she's a parent and she will tell us about her child and her experience with being a special needs parent. And she's also worked quite a lot as a volunteer with Autism Society and a lot of other things. So, Firoza, what would you like to tell us about, your story, or, what stories you have heard of other parents who have special needs?
Yeah, my son now is 12 years old, and from birth, we had some not difficulties, but he was just a different type of baby. Like I had my kids 14 months apart. And I remember when my daughter was born, I'm like, wow, you're such an easy baby. Because at that time, we didn't know about my son being on the autism spectrum. So when my son was born, he had acid reflux, and we treated that with different medications. And then he started to eat really well. But then about the time where the first instance where I noticed something was different about him was at that time, babycenter.com used to send weekly emails telling you, hey, your baby this week. And when he was 6 months old, I had him playing on the living room floor, and he was lining up little toys and spinning them. And then I was reading my email, and it said scientists have discovered that you can tell if your baby might be on the autism spectrum at around the age of 6 months if they're lining up toys and spinning things. And then I looked down and I thought, oh dear, I should call the pediatrician. So I called, I made an appointment, went in, and the pediatrician said, no, it's too early, it's too early. But the parent, like especially me, I had a gut feeling, but also I was also in a little bit of denial because this is my firstborn kid. I'm a new parent. I was only 27 at the time, 26, 27, pretty young. And I just like thought, okay, I'll put it in the back of my mind. The pediatrician said he's fine, let's just keep going the way we're going and see what happens. So then a few more months goes by. He doesn't sleep properly. He's not eating. He went back to only drinking milk and nothing else. We went back to the pediatrician, and just for a regular 1 year checkup, and he hadn't grown since the last checkup. So he said, you know what? I think he might be on the autism spectrum. So this is a number you can call. And that's what Jodi was talking about. There's a number for Minnesota Help Me Grow. And there is a nurse that will come to your home, evaluate your child. And if the nurse thinks that there's something that needs to be looked at or addressed, they'll call your local school district or give you a number to call. And then they'll refer you. And I remember picking up the phone, and that time I lived in Minneapolis, and I called the number. It was the wrong number, and I just didn't do anything about it because I thought, well, he's doing okay. He's talking. He's sort of starting to eat. Another year goes by, and then he's not really crawling on time, not walking on time. But then we moved from an apartment to a house, and then he started to crawl. So then I thought, oh, well, maybe he just didn't have enough room in the apartment to crawl or not motivated to do it. Then he started walking and sort of talking for a while. But then at around the age of 2, just before his second birthday, we had the evaluation with the Hopkins School District. And I remember taking him in the back of my mind, I knew, but at the same time, you have that glimmer of hope as a parent that you want everything to be normal, quote unquote. And I remember the last test they did for him was they sat him down and they said, oh, it's baby's birthday today. Let's take a baby. So they have this baby doll, and the child is supposed to make like a birthday cake out of Play-Doh and then put a candle in, and he couldn't do it. So then the lady looks up at me and she says, do you want to know now or do you want to wait for the report? And then I said, no, I want to know now. Just tell me. She's like, okay, I'm really sorry, but your child is moderate to severe autism at that point because he was delayed in multiple things. And then, like, like I started crying because, like, every parent doesn't want to hear that news. So, and then I remember driving home, dropping him off with my mom, going to the grocery store and getting a gluten-free diet and trying him on that. And then we started interventions at home because once they're under the age of 3, the school district will come home. And then over the years, we've tried different things with him. And now he's doing really well. Jody is actually his teacher. So, and he's back in the school district. So, like, that's like our journey. And he still does have a little bit of developmental delay, but he's thriving and doing really well. And I wish I had when that wrong number that I had dialed when he was 1, I wish I had done my research and called earlier, because as a parent, the key thing I want to let everybody know is, like, yes, you will be in denial. It can be your firstborn, your secondborn, even your thirdborn. But I would encourage you, just if someone says your baby is not okay and you think that, no, 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 that can't possibly be, your baby might need a little extra help. No parent wants to hear those words. And I've met other parents over the years. Like, I remember when my son went to early childhood special education in where we live, I remember dropping him off, and there was another Indian family who were here in the United States on a temporary visa. I think the father was working for Tata Consultancy, and the mom and the dad were dropping their son off. And my son said hello to his son, to their son, and they walked in together. And the mom introduced herself, and she said, "Oh, my son is not autistic. It's just the way that people here see education, and maybe we don't know English very well, or they think they don't, and he's just behind." So then but her son clearly had stims and just different, the telltale signs of autism. So yeah, that's like our story so far.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Feroza. I know how difficult it is to say these experiences or talk about these experiences after going through what you went through, because I can understand, and I have seen other parents who find it very difficult. And firstly, the denial carries on for years. So I would say, fortunately, you were so aware, you were an aware parent, you were trying to educate yourself about what is happening with the baby, and you went and got help and made an early diagnosis. But many parents wait until elementary school, or even then they're in denial, because as you rightly pointed out, that parents don't want to even entertain the idea that maybe something is wrong with my child. So whenever the teachers or others say that maybe let's get the child evaluated, their first reaction is, no, nothing is wrong, maybe it's the language, maybe it's he's just 3 or 4, or they talk about other things. So it is so important, like you pointed out, to be aware of the developmental milestones and observe your baby and make sure that he is on the path. Of course, many kids develop later, so there might be late bloomers, so that possibility is there, but we need to get to the doctor, or we need to get to the experts and get the evaluation done, so that you catch them early on, so that you can provide all the intervention and resources, so they learn to function, and they are able to go to school and do other things. So thank you for sharing that story, and we will come back and hear more from you. I want to move on to Manjushri. Manjushri, you heard Feroza talk, and we know that especially Asian Indian parents have not only denial, not only that stigma about what is wrong with my baby, but also shame, like log kya kahenge, and so many other things associated with it. So what can you tell us, especially since you work in this field for such a long time? Can you tell us about that? You need to unmute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So, thank you, Jody, and thank you, Feroza. I think you've really made a fantastic start to our conversation here today. And taking on from where Feroza left off, I am reminded of this journey of a parent that I often talk about when I'm speaking with parents about having a child with challenges. So if you notice so beautifully, Feroza, when she spoke about her journey, she spoke about the first stage, which was about being aware. You know, when her baby was 6 months old, just those tentacles going up and being aware, oh, my child is doing this. So it started with that. Then somewhere along the line, acknowledgement. So awareness, acknowledging it. Okay, I'm acknowledging it. Maybe she put the phone down thinking it was the wrong number. She had internally acknowledged it, but it took her a while to move from acknowledging it to accepting it. So there's awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, and then you come to that final stage of addressing the child's needs, which is the entire journey that Feroza has walked us through. I think she's just, given us a complete nutshell in that. And when you speak about the Indian community, yes, I think, be it India, be it anywhere across the world, I think you're very right when you talk about the stigma, when you talk about this log kya kahenge, which really comes from the basic psyche. I think, I don't know whether I want to say it's very specific to Indian community or there are other communities, but I can speak only because I live only in India, and I know that prima facie being different is not accepted anywhere in the country. So different for any reason, whatever the reason may be. So that is where the whole journey, or rather all the drama of life begins, because you want to be same, you want to be like everybody else, and you want to fit in constantly. And so the moment your child shows a little bit of diversion, a little bit of diversity, a little bit of uniqueness, suddenly all hell breaks loose. Now what happens is, we as educators, you, me, as people who've probably seen, we are seeing a lot more of it, we call it unique and we celebrate it. But for most parents who are habituated with comparing children, that's when all the trauma starts, because you always want to know that your child is like the others and can do things like another child in his class, or like that peer in the on the ground in the park. And when you see that that's not happening, you start killing yourself for it. You know, as a parent, it starts playing havoc on your mind. So it is a very, very difficult journey for most of our parents everywhere across the globe, especially in India. More so in India, denial is something that happens. You ask bigger schools, you ask them. I go for these sessions, and most counselors and special educators ask me this question: Manjushri, tell us, how do we get parents to accept it? So there are, we have to have these long conversations about what are the kind of key phrases you can use. Things like, you got to tell your parent that, look, we've not declared to you, like Firoza went to her doctor, her nurse, or whoever she met, and she told her that, can I give you the news now? Your child is on the spectrum. So when I tell a parent that, whether the child has learning disabilities, whether the child has cognitive disabilities, whatever it could be, we are telling the parent, we are not telling you that your child is terminally ill. So stop behaving that way. There is always hope in every situation. And somewhere you really need to give them a knock on the head, a gentle knock on the head, and say, look, wake up, your child is okay. So it's a learning disability, it's not the end of the world. It's not like the child is never going to function in life. It's all right, he'll get a spell check, he'll get a writer. Your child can't walk, all right, he'll get something to get himself to be moving and mobile. There are ways to look at situations in a more hopeful way. And that's something that we need to keep egging our parents to believe. When that journey begins, then they start looking at ways where they can support the child and make a better life for the child.
Wow, yeah. That is such a powerful message, is sort of reframe the narrative around what it means for my child to have special needs. So here's a question which follows all three of your responses, or all three, whatever you said. So especially in our culture, as we all know that, Asian immigrants, or the Asian community in general, has been termed as, the successful group of people, highly educated. South Asians are, they are successful in their careers, they hold these high paying jobs. And that comes from the cultural piece where parents expect academic excellence from their kids, right? It's a given sort of. It is something that is passed on. And though the parent in certain families might not say it out loud, but the child hears these messages from the family members, relatives, community, the school, that hey, you are an Indian boy or a girl, you will be good in math and reading. So if there's a child who is facing learning disabilities, for example, how do we talk to the parent when on one hand there's this extreme need for their child to excel, and on the other hand we are saying, he will function, he needs this intervention, he needs this help, and as Manjushri you said, that it is not the end of the world, he will do fine. So what can we tell parents who are worried about the label being a lifelong label? Because it's not just, oh, just going from kindergarten to first grade. It's they worry. And I'm sure, Jodi, you hear this, especially from your South Asian students' parents, that, no, no, don't label him because we want to go back to India, or, we don't want him put under that category. What will happen? Will he get to high school? Will he get to college? So what would you say about that resistance to get the evaluation done, or just that whole piece?
Do you want me to answer that as a
uh,
parent?
Anybody can jump in. Feroza,
Oh,
you can start. Yeah.
yeah. So if we reframe, like as Manjushri was saying, if we reframe how we think about special needs, and I can't speak to all special needs because I'm an autism parent, but if we our goal in life as being parents is to have children and raise them to be productive members of our society, and our role as parents is to give our children those tools. And part of that is, if your child has special needs, how can we help them, and how can we work with members of our community to help them live a productive life? How can we get them to reach that goal of maybe eventually being independent? And if they'll never be independent, how can we teach them to rely on the tools that are available in the world out there to make them more successful people? And if we frame it to parents that way, then I'm sure that more people will come around to it. Because honestly, I remember when the first day that the people came to my house for my son, they came in with like a bag of toys, this old tube, and they were teaching my son how to play. And I thought, and at first I thought, like, what are they doing with these toys? And what is this tube? And they were teaching me how to get him to play more with me, how to interact more with his toys. And it was so helpful. So I would recommend to all parents, no matter what age your child is, to listen to other members of the community. Yes, you know your child the best, but sometimes we have these things called love blinding glasses, I call them, and we can't take those off. Like sometimes I remember once I was telling a friend of a friend of a friend that I think your kid could be on the spectrum. No one wants to hear that. And to for them, they stopped talking to me because I was the person who told them. So, but like, we need to move on from the anger part of it, the shame part of it, the stigma. And if we reframe, then we can move on and we can be like a good parent who makes their kid more productive and a happier child who can move on with their lives.
What I also want to add to this is that there are two things. One is, like you said, they don't want to get themselves tested. So I've often said this to parents, when they come to me that no, 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 we don't want to get. Why do we need to get him tested? He's all okay. So I tell them, look, I also believe he's completely okay, but it won't do us any harm if we just get him tested. One, two, by not testing him, his problems, his challenges, his difficulties are not going to go away. So it's like, again, a denial. I don't want to get myself tested for cancer because what if I have cancer? But hello, if you do have cancer, sooner or later it's going to come and catch you and get you. So it's better that you find it out soon and not put the phone down, like that moment of frenzy where you feel no, 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 I think everything is all right. And the third very important element, Saidi, that I want to stress upon is somewhere we've constantly gone on to say that labeling is disabling. While I do agree to some extent with that phrase, I do beg to differ somewhere, because I believe that unless you label a challenge, I don't want to call it a problem because people kind of see it very negatively. Unless you label it, you will not be able to give services. So, labeling can be enabling for the child and for the parent so that you can start making headway in the right direction. If I don't know whether this is COVID, or I don't know whether this is a pneumonia, or I don't know whether it is just a basic, simple flu, how am I going to give the right kind of services? So that's where I feel labeling is not disabling. Labeling has its own merit. Yes, I agree, sitting in the staff room and loosely sitting at a kiddie party and probably, talking about, oh, that LD child, oh, that autism child, that's where you don't want the labels to pop in. The child has a name, you can call him by the name, call her by the name. So I feel these are two, three things that need to be really kept in mind when we start the journey. When you spoke about testing, that's what came to my mind, that I think tests have their value, and I think Jodi would agree with me, because it gives us as special educators the line of action, a roadmap. Isn't that right, Jodi?
Yes, and I totally agree. It helps. I mean, there you can over test, and but if you're again, we were looking at those categories. Where are we looking at? We're looking at autism. Okay, this will help us, because then we have the right people who will support. We'll have that speech pathologist right beside us, because 9 times out of 10, there's usually a speech pathologist or a communications need, and that'll help us. The more we have, instead of siloing ourselves away, it hurts. You need to, I love, the amount of team members I work with daily, I learn so much, and then we can help support the child. I was going to say again, with that early intervention, how important it is. I mean, I work in an elementary school, so kindergarten through fifth. We're getting them, at 5, 6 years old. They could have been, as Feroza was saying, like, what 1 year old, 2 year old, getting those services. We do get many children who just pop up, and we get them at 5. And the children who come from that preschool, that early childhood, there's so much difference in their support, and those people already know them. And when they come to us, then we know them. We can read that history, because all that paperwork and evaluations is there for us, and we update it. We update it daily, we update it annually, we update it, monthly in some ways. So the longer we have that, it's so important just to be able to know.
Yeah,
I'd like
and I like how how Manjushri said we should call it challenges, because that term itself puts a spin on it and saying it's a challenge. Let's see what we can do about it. Feroza, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just going back to that early intervention, like my son was just about 2 years old and he wasn't talking like he used to talk. Like with autism, there's a telltale warning sign, especially with boys, that if they talk to about 18 months, 20 months, and suddenly it's gone, that is like a huge sign of autism. And that's what happened. My son used to talk till like say his numbers 1 to 20. He used to watch videos and mimic them. And then all of a sudden that was gone. And then I remember telling my mom, I was like, I wonder what it would be like for him to call me mommy. I don't know what his voice sounds like anymore. And then, I kid you not, like 3 months after this early intervention where the people were coming to our house, he looked up to me. He said, Mommy, I'm hungry. And I cried because like finally he's talking and he communicated to me. He called me by my name and he said he was hungry. He communicated his need. And at the time we were going for occupational therapy at St. David's Center, and the occupational therapist is Robin, and she was with me before the diagnosis and even after. And she said, I am so glad you did this. And I didn't know how to tell you, because a lot of people, it's really taboo in all cultures that they don't want to talk about this. So she said, if you didn't notice this, but before you got the interventions, he would sit next to you, but he would never look at you, but he would feel you for comfort, and he wouldn't meet my eyes or your eyes. And now he's looking at you, he's talking to you, he's talking to me. And when he searches for you, he knows your mom and he's looking at you. So it's so important to do those early interventions.
Yeah, it's given me goosebumps just to hearing you say those things. It looks like it takes so much patience and so as a parent, like, just not giving up and keeping on working with the service people and also with your child. Uh, so, Jody, I was wondering, would you like to talk a little bit about what does that IEP team or the team of professionals who works with kids in the school with special needs looks like?
Yes, I will. I'm happy to speak to that.
Yeah, I'll share the slide.
I have I can. um, so once we have that evaluation and a more or less diagnosis to say, okay, we'll have those 13 categories, then we develop what's called an IEP, an acronym that stands for Individualized Education Program. So it's a program that we have that we'll put together, and it's not just myself writing it, it's all the members of the team that the student then qualifies for. So if they qualify in speech or communication need, language need, then we'll have support in there. We'll have service minutes, we'll have goals in there, or gross motor needs, fine motor needs like writing. There's many different things that we could access in that way. But with that IEP, we'll be looking at goals and objectives that the student will be working on. Where are those lagging skills or those challenges that we could help support the student be able to be in their general education class? So we're always looking at what the general education classroom's doing and how we can support them to be in there all the time, and then or just support outside for a little bit. So there's different levels of support, and sometimes like my classroom, I provide all of the support, all of the class, all of the reading, writing, math, social skills, daily living skills. And some students only need a little bit of support. So then they go into a different classroom they pull out for a couple of minutes or 30 minutes and then they go back. And that's where you look at the service minute page. We'll have a page just designated for that. Also on there is a modification and accommodations. In the classroom, after school, we have, if it's like a school, if anything to do with the public school, if there's after school care, a child can receive services in that area as well. And then also para-educators. These are so important. They're people who are trained and are able to go in the classrooms and support the student. And so it's not just myself, it's people who are developing relationships. And I know like Feroza, I've had her child in my room for 5 years, and so developing those relationships with a child is so important. That trust. And so you have a paraeducators for that, and that's where you write in those modifications and accommodations, like what they might need to help them be their best in that classroom, or what might they need to be able to be in the general education classroom, but then also in the special ed room as well. We have a present level page, and that it's all about its parent input, its service provider input, and it just goes through like, where is this child at this time? Again, there's testing support that we can write in, and then transition support. That's when the student reaches around 14 and you start developing what they're going to do after school and after they reach end their career in public school. And then of course we talk about it's called the least restrictive environment, LRE. And what is your child missing when they are away from the GE classroom, general education classroom? That's an important part that we always fill out, and it's what are they missing? What are they not having provided for them, and what are we doing to help support that so they're not missing out on the fun things, and also things that they're important for them. But we try to balance that as well as we can. Then there's that special education team. There are 4 people who are required to be at the meeting every single time. And there's an annual meeting that is set up so that it goes a whole school year, and then we'll meet again. We can always meet. That's one thing parents sometimes don't know. We can meet anytime.
So you're talking about a parent meeting with this special education team. right?
Yes, and so we can, that program is a program for all of us. And so we can, yes, we have to have an annual meeting, but we could have meetings, all, we can get together the team and speak anytime that you might have a concern or a need, or we can change anything, there's, we've got to, we've met the goal. Let's change it so we can have a better goal. But those people at the team required are the special education teacher, or it's called a case manager, and that person has to have a license in the category of diagnoses. So I have an autism license. I can be present there. If I did not have it, then somebody else would have to be there to be able to speak about autism. And the same for developmentally cognitive disabilities. They have to have that licensure so they can speak to that field. You also have to have a general education teacher. It can be a classroom teacher, or they could be a person who works with a student. Some of my students don't go to the general education classrooms. They go to the art room. So we have that art teacher there. But it's somebody to speak toward that curriculum. What are they missing, or what is questions about that? So we can talk about it, be more of a team on that level. You have a district representative. It can be anybody who can speak or agree to services needed. So if you want more paraeducation support, then you need somebody who can more or less pay for that. So we need a principal or a service director, somebody who can agree to those needs. And of course, the most important people are the parents, representative for the student. And parents can bring up along from other communities, whoever they want to bring in that team, they can bring others in. You don't, to have support if needed. And then I guess you can see the next slide is just who could be part of the team. There's a lot of people that you can be on a team. I have sometimes in the district, I work with a couple of students who have like 10 people. That's a lot of team members, but there's a lot of need.
Yes.
So
So
yes,
depending on each student's needs, there can be multiple team members. So this is interesting, and that leads to my next question. Actually, you mentioned that the family representative, which generally are the parents, but in the Indian culture or the South Asian culture, the extended family members play an important role in any child's life. So, whether it's a diagnosis of special needs, or whether the child just has a cold, or whether it's about what school to send the child to, these all decisions might be made after consulting with extended family members like grandparents, uncles, aunts, older siblings, or whoever. So when you have a child with special needs, parents, that issue about how to tell people, or that shame or guilt or whatever you see associated, is also about how am I going to tell my extended family about this. There is a negative connotation to that, and people don't know how to deal with that. So even if they as parents maybe have accepted, but when it comes to telling the grandma or grandpa or uncle, it is a big issue. So I would love for you all to talk about that factor. And Feroza, you can talk about your experience, and Manjushri, of course, you
Yeah.
can talk about the context too.
In fact, it's a coincidence. Just 2 days ago, my team colleagues and me, we were discussing this, and so I'm running a small organization Sorry, can't hear you.
Yeah, now you're okay. Yeah, now you talk. Sorry,
Yeah.
Manjushri, go ahead.
Alright, alright. So it was just a couple of days ago that my team members and me we were discussing this. So Atman Academy is a school that we've started 10 years ago. It's an alternative school setup, and for want of a better word, yes. Well, because we think of only in mainstream schools and special schools, and so since most kids of my school have challenges, we've been put under the category of special schools. I have no problem with the nomenclature, but I do believe that we are an inclusive school, because one of my TEDx talks I've actually spoken about that, where I've redefined inclusion and I've said where there are diverse people who come together and pursue a goal, and they learn together, work together. I think those spaces are inclusive spaces. So it doesn't matter whether one child is on the autism spectrum, one child has learning disabilities, one child has intellectual challenges, and one child doesn't have any issue. So coming back to your question about the family, I was just reminded, my colleagues and I, we were just reminiscing the other day. We've had so many instances, Siley, where we've had literally grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt for that one admission. I have my entire office full, people sitting from one end to the other end. They all come and they have a million zillion questions, and these conversations go on for like 1.5 hours, 2 hours. We are like sitting there, there's tea and there is biscuits being served, and we are like, go ahead, ask all the questions that you have to. And typically, there will be at least somebody within that, and especially the ones who are the grandparents or uncles and aunts. So our child will become normal after he comes to your school. So we're saying, hello, one thing, there is nothing called normal. Nobody is normal. Then we get into this whole gamut of conversations around, are you normal? Am I normal? Nobody is normal. There's nothing called normal. Nobody has defined normalcy. Then we look at, giving them a whole idea that we are a school that caters to his or her needs. Their needs are what we cater to. So we look at what they have as a challenge and we'll work around it. What the child is good at, we'll strive to make it better and best. What the child struggles with, we will support him or her. And if at all the child is not able to get through that, you and I are going to accept that that's okay. It's all right if your child is not able to get through his grade 10. It's perfectly fine. So this journey for them is a bit challenging. And also I want to add here before I end that even in spite of all of this, Siley, we struggle with the extended family many a times. Sometimes, and Feroza will have many experiences to share on this, sometimes that extended family starts with the father. The father also becomes part of that extended family and is in non-acceptance of the child. And the mother has battles that start with the spouse, and it is so difficult for her. So she's battling mother-in-law, father-in-law, mother, father, sister-in-law, whoever. But sometimes her battles begin just as at an arm's distance, like the father who's saying, oh, you don't need to put your child into that school. That school is not for our child. Our child should be in XYZ school. Why are you putting him in there? It's nonsense, blah blah blah. And so when the mother has to go through all of this, there's so much support that we need to render to her first and foremost. And first get her into this scheme of thoughts, then get the father in, then get the grandparents in. And in spite of that, I have had so many episodes and situations where grandparents, grandmothers, grandfathers are so nasty at home with the child, directly with the child, saying that, oh, you are a good for nothing, you're not going to be able to do anything. What are you going to achieve? Look at what you're doing in that school. You're hardly doing, in half the time you're singing, dancing, playing, or doing some kind of mumbo jumbo, which is of no use. Where is your study time? You're hardly putting your nose into books. That comes as a big problem for parents. And so family counseling becomes very imperative many a time. So we really get them in, talk to them, throw some light on the situation, and hope for the best. Fingers crossed.
Yes, yes, definitely. There's a need for redefinition and also what it means to bring up a child. As you said, each child is unique. So whether or not they are struggling with academics or anything else, yeah, I can totally see. And that's the reason we need to create more awareness. Because unless there's more education, unless the parents and the family members learn more about it, they're not going to dispel all these myths and all these preconceived notions that they have about what it means to be normal. Feroza?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that Autism Speaks has these toolkits, which are downloadable PDFs. And I know a lot of people in the autism community don't like Autism Speaks. It's a big, giant can of worms, but it's a different discussion for a different day. But these toolkits are really awesome. They helped us. Like when my son was first had that educational diagnosis, we didn't tell anybody for a year, but then finally we noticed we had to tell people, and these kits really helped. There was one for how to tell your friends, and you can just print it out and give it to them. And then there was one for how to tell grandparents. And my parents and my in-laws already knew, but it actually helped them because it gave them a background about autism. And then it said, oh, is it genetic? It's just like, it's not the fault of the parents that the child was born with this. This is just the way they are. And then there was another one for siblings, and there's another one just for parents. And I think the best thing that they have is the 100-day kit. And it tells you what to do those first 100 days after diagnosis. And there's one for kids under the age of 7 and over the age of 7. And it just lists out what the parents can go through, because, you know, there is a process of grief, and a lot of adults on the autism spectrum get mad when they think parents are like having a grief, because, you know, but it is because when our child is born, we have a set thing that we think that they're going to go to school, they're going to grow up, they're going to have friends, they're going to get married, they're going to be going to university. Then when you get this diagnosis, even if your child's at a young age, you start to question that. And then you think, what is my child's life going to be? And my friend, a friend of mine, Cami, that I met through volunteering with all the autism charities that I have, she has a teen on the spectrum, and her teenager came up to her and he said, Mom, are you upset that I'm autistic? And she took him and she said, no, I am not. I am just upset that you will have a more difficult time negotiating with the world. And my job is to help you negotiate the world, but also as a parent, we're also responsible with changing the world. Like, how can we change our world to talk more about autism, talk more about special needs? And this video that we're doing right now is one of the ways that I'm trying to take control of this situation and give back. So, yeah.
Yeah, very well put. And Feroza, if you can send me the resource links, I would be happy to put them under this video as well as on our Asha USA website, where we have a resource page. We have a lot of resources on mental health there, and we can make a special tab about special needs. And even Jodi and Manjushri, if you have anything, which especially for parents and family members to understand, or how to talk about it and things like that, because that's our goal. What it means to be different, right? So that's so important. And we actually, this is such a big topic and so many things to cover, but I definitely want to ask one more question, and that's about gender differences when it comes to special needs. So, are there any cultural biases? Because we know that gender roles are rigid when it comes to raising boys versus girls. So, does society treat boys and girls with special needs differently? And also, we cannot go without talking about the comorbidities, because I'm sure along with these conditions, I'm sure kids experience a lot of other issues like sleep disorders, eating disorders, anxiety, and other issues. So if all three of you can talk about these two topics, that would be great.
I can give like my personal thing that happened with our family. Like, as I said before, my son had stomach issues, sleep issues. To this day, we still have sleep issues with him. Then for girls, it's much different. Autism presents very differently in girls, and they can slip under the radar. And I am one of them. Like, I never knew until, because like I was a TV reporter, a newspaper reporter. I have friends. I went to school. I went to college. I'm married. I have children. But, you know, I never really fit in everywhere. And I was looking at an article once about the differences between girls and boys and autism, and every single one, if you look back when I was a child, I met every single checklist. Like, were you bullied in school? Did you ever have problems at the workplace, making friends at the workplace? Because for me, I had like a dedicated, my friends are at home, work is just work. And I remember there was a beautiful anchor woman that I still know to this day who had this tea party every year at like after work. And she once took me to the side and said, look at this picture. And I said, oh yeah, you guys look like you're having fun. You're dressing up with cool hats and everything. What is this? She's like, oh, it's my annual tea party, but you know, you're not really part of the group here. So I'm just wondering, where is your head at? Like, are you like, do you want to be friends? I'm like, of course I want to be friends. Like it never occurred to me. So if you're one of those people that has like rigid thoughts, but I can only speak for myself. Like I found out at the age of 38 that I'm on the autism spectrum. And to this day, my mom will tell me, you're not on the spectrum. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, yeah, I know there's nothing wrong with me. My brain is different. I'm neurodiverse. So I have so many stories about things that should have been obvious, but I never saw it. So yeah, I could go on forever.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that Firoza has said is so right, that they kind of fly under the radar. Girls, especially, I see that happening a lot in our country. So in my school, uh, I have mostly boys. I mean, there are girls. The number of girls to boys is probably, I have 25% girls and 75% boys. Why? Because girls tend to fit in more easily. Girls do what it takes to become part of the group and not stick out. And their acting out behavior is much lesser. So what typically happens with children who have challenges, if they have, they are prone to probably attention deficit shows very differently in boys and in girls as well. So you'll see boys that are all over the place and there's a lot of acting out behavior, whereas with girls they probably just lie low. They will probably not do the things that their neurotypical peers would be doing, but they will be there. So like, I'll give you an example. This one time I had a child who came to me from a big school here, and she was in grade 7. And when she came to me in grade 7, she wasn't even able to write her own name. So we just started out. I told her, you can draw this. And I told her, yeah, just write your name, okay? And I said it very casually because I thought standard 7 would be like cool. But she wasn't able to write her own name. That's when we realized, and she was in a very, very well established school. Why did that happen? Because she was just very easily getting ignored. She was quiet, she was reticent, she was sitting in a corner, she was not troubling, quote unquote. She was not troubling anybody in the class. She was not a bother for the teacher. So she didn't know her stuff, but that didn't really get to the teacher. It's okay. So from one class to the next class to the next class to the next class, she kept going from one year to the other year without even being able to write her own name. While I don't really stress on spelling, I just feel your own name is something that you could probably be able to do. And that's when we began to realize, yeah, I guess girls just are not given that level of importance, and it's okay if a girl doesn't really manage. That does happen a lot. Well, I'll be very honest to tell you that things are changing now. I'm not going to say that they're as bad as they were before, probably 10 years ago. But today, that attitude is slowly and gradually moving away. I mean, people are taking more cognizance of the fact that their child is not learning, irrespective of the gender.
Like, and just going
Jody?
back to
Yeah.
labeling, if I could add one thing, like just
Yeah.
going back to that labeling conversation we had earlier, like speaking personally, I had mixed feelings going into testing. But once I got that label, I remember sitting in the car, staring at my steering wheel, being like, oh, I am also autistic like my son. And like I was going through all the feelings and thinking that, this is like, how is this label going to affect me? And it's actually helped me because like with autism, executive functioning is the big issue about it. Like with people out there who don't know what executive functioning is, it's just doing day-to-day tasks. So you know what, I hate doing dishes, I hate cleaning, I don't like to cook, and now I know kind of why. So when I'm not just lazy, I know I just have, like, it's just more difficult for me to get on that route. So I schedule myself, like from this time to this time is dishes, from this time to this time is meal prep. So it gave me the tools to be a better functioning adult. So if I can do this now, imagine what you can do for your kid at early childhood and even in elementary school, that you're going to give them the tools to be a more functioning human being. So it helped me at this age. Imagine how it can help your own child.
Yeah, and what you both are talking, Manjushri and Feroza, are again the acceptance, right? As soon as you accept it, you can think, how am I going to deal with these challenges, or how am I going to help my child deal with his or her challenges? So, acceptance is a big part. Jodi, did you want to add something to girls versus boys? Do you see any differences in your classroom?
Yeah, well, depending on the year, I have to say, I mean, overall, it's you see much more boys. I mean, they run, especially in autism, it's well known too that they tend to find more, identify at that, but it could be, again, just you're missing those girls, because girls tend to be rule followers, which a lot of autism is, we follow it this way. Okay, we can do that. Being quiet, yes. A lot of the girls that I have in my class, the language part is definitely a big part that they're missing, and so I have, again, I work with kids more, from mild to profound needs. So in there, but I've had one time where I think, like, for 3 years, we had like 4 girls in the room and like 2 boys, which was a hoot in a different way, because the girls, they kind of took charge, and you could see their personalities come through, and it did actually help the boys a little bit to follow the rules a little bit more, because this is how we run it, and the boys would just be like, oh, running around doing their own thing. So yeah, you see it in different ways. It's again, I never have a dull moment in our room. We're always laughing. Um, but again, because of the successes and just the things that are said, sometimes it's just fun to be part of that. But going, like what Feroz was saying, like those scheduling, executive functioning, like we're doing that. Like that's many of our goals are those learning those, how to follow a list, how to get ready for something, how to do it, and following things in a row. We do that a lot, especially with food, because food is motivating. But how do I put my clothes on? How do I get my lunchbox out? How do I do those simple tasks? We're working on those every single day. And that's so important to be able to function in a school and once you know what's expected, then you really can find out the different skills that we can, especially in the academic realm. Once you get those skills really settled down, and that's what I had a parent who did tell me, like, all of these supports that I'm getting are helping. I'm learning, and we're helping the child go forward, because then we can figure out everything, and it does help, and we do see successes. We don't try to keep them away from that general ed classroom. We want to help support them, and once they generalize, go forward.
Mhm. Yeah, that is so important. And that brings us to our last topic or last question for today. And as you just pointed out, that, the family doesn't function in isolation, right? So even if the parents understand what the child needs, even if they get all the things that the child needs, they live in a community. So, what message would you give to others who do not have kids with special needs, but who know people who have friends with kids with special needs, or who have family members whose kids are special needs? What would we, like, what message will you give them as to talking to people with kids with special needs, or interacting with them, or how can they be supportive in a positive way, rather than being afraid to talk to them about, or ignoring certain issues because, no, I don't want to ask about her child, what will she feel, she might feel bad, or whatever it is. So what would each of you tell us about that?
Include us, please include us. Like, I have hosted so many dinner parties at my house, and then people never call us back because they think that, oh, how will her child react in my household? And like, he's totally fine at home. Like, I remember once we had a dinner party with just one couple who had recently moved to town, and my daughter and their daughter hit it off, so we said, come over for dinner. And I remember my son was sitting at the dinner table with the iPad, and he needs that iPad to eat. Like, he doesn't need it, but he's like relying on that. Like, it keeps him calm. He'll watch a video and eat. And they were like appalled that this iPad was on the table. Like, how dare they? Like, they're setting a bad example for my kid. And then I just want to tell people, try and include everybody, call them over to your parties. Um, don't judge. That there's like a whole thing about judgment, especially in the Indian community. Like these couple that we invited over were actually white, but but like just don't judge, try and be more accepting. And then another time we were actually invited to a huge Diwali party 2 years ago, and there was a lot of people there, and my son really wanted to come. I dressed him up in the Indian clothes. We went there, and it was really overwhelming, and usually he just needs to sit down in one spot, and it can be up to an hour and a half, but we'll sit, we'll have fun, and then he'll be able to get up and move. And I remember sitting on the couch, and another lady came up to me and she says, "Oh, yeah, like, did you notice my son? He's got Down syndrome. He was here. We usually just bring him for a little while and we take him home." And then I thought, "Oh, why is she telling me this?" And then I realized, from the corner of my eye, I saw the hostess, like the lady whose house that we were at. And I thought, like, "Oh my gosh, is she telling me to tell this woman to come to me and take my kid home?" And I just told that lady, I'm like, "Oh, I'm glad that works for you, but we want him to grow up being used to parties." So, and and people mean well. Like, even my husband's coworkers, one of them came up to me once and said, "We want to have you over, but how would your son take it?" I'm like, "Oh, he would love it. Like, just expect the unexpected, but try and be more open and understanding, and ask people, what do you need? What can I do?" And I want to tell families, it's okay to tell people, "My kid only eats this, this, and this. I will bring his food. Is that okay with you?" And I go, no insult to your cooking too, because some people are really sensitive about their cooking, especially this one lady that we know. So just if everyone can have an open mind and try and be more inclusive, that would be amazing. And call people over for dinner and invite us to parties. That would be great. Otherwise, it's very lonely.
You, Feroza. Yeah, thank you. Those are very useful tips. Manjushri?
Yeah, I'd like to just share one picture, which comes obviously because we're talking about inclusion here. If you'd give me the permission, I'll just quickly share one picture that says it all for me. Oftentimes, with regards to what do you tell the community? That's it says it all. It's such a powerful little picture here. So the person is asking, so what do you prefer to be called? Handicapped, disabled, or physically challenged? So well, Joe would be fine, just fine. Why do you need to call me by any other name? My name is Joe. The most appropriate label is usually the one people's parents have given them. So when we are talking about labeling, disabling, and we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about a whole gamut of things that are so interconnected. But what do we tell the community? All we are telling the community is you don't want to see them as something other than you. So, we have a saying in a little quote in Sanskrit, which talks about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is a family, is my home. And if I can start treating everybody around me as that and stop looking at them first as abilities and disabilities, and just see people as they are. I don't even know why we want to call them differently abled again. That also becomes a label eventually. So we say we don't use the word disability, call them differently able. After a point of time, differently able will also get stigmatized. So everything becomes a stigma because it's all in our mind, it's all in the way we look at things. So the world is not the way I mean, for me, the world is the way I am. So if I change my own spectacles, then I'm going to see things differently. And so we are urging parents, we are urging the community. And I would personally want to just tell everybody, definitely taking on from what Feroza has said, inclusion starts with I. And
Yeah.
if I decide that you are me, you are just another reflection of me, then I will stop excluding you. I'll start including you more. If I see that Feroza's child is with me and Feroza is me, and her child is also a part of me, I think I'm speaking from a very spiritual stance, maybe, but it does no harm in having that mind frame actually. where I say, okay, we're all just one big unit, and they are who they are, and we don't know why they are that way. So what happens is we typically tend to see a person on a wheelchair as a person on a wheelchair before we see the person as Joe. And so
Hmm.
that paradigm shift is what we are urging everybody around to start making. That's it.
Wow, that's I love that. Inclusion starts with I, and that applies to so many other issues that we worry about, whether it's mental health, whether it's so many other taboo issues in the society. So
And
I will
if I can
definitely
also,
remember.
in fact, Saili, if I can also add, all through my trainings with the government that I used to do, I used to keep telling them. So here we're training on inclusive education practices and all of that. But you know what? The bottom line is inclusion is not only what you do. It is what you do, I agree. But it's not only what you do. For me, inclusion is who I am. What I do comes next. But who I
Hmm.
am I a person who is inclusive? Have I included myself? Have I included my
Yeah.
own diversities? Or do I say, oh, I wish I was a little taller? Oh, I wish my teeth were not so crooked? Oh, I wish all of those 1,000 things that my own diversities have not accepted. So, inclusion is who I am and what I bring into the room. That's where the
Exactly.
inclusion begins, and there I can just go on. Yeah, like, that's another whole
No,
day
we
of
need to have
conversation.
another session for this topic, but yeah, very, very important. Thank you so much. I've also heard that when people talk about diversity, diversity from what? Because we have a standard norm, which we think this is the norm and everybody should be like this. And when we talk about diverse people or diverse abilities, we're talking about something that is not in keeping with the norm. So that brings back to it that, what is normal? There's nothing normal. Each one is unique. So yeah, Jodi, did you want to say what you would say to people who are trying to support families who have kids with special needs?
I love listening to everybody. It was wonderful. I love that. Yes. For us, it's just, ask questions. We have many things at our school where we have a grouping called buddies, where we have fifth graders come into our classroom who want to sign up, or they knew their sister or brother used to be a buddy with ours. And it's all it is just about learning and learning and being aware, accepting, finding out what, like, and the questions we get are, it's so supportive. And sometimes we're just like, ask the student, go ask that, and the kids can tell them. We really work on advocating, and I think that's so important, just to, little kindergartners are asking all the time, what can I do to help? And I think, asking questions that maybe are hard, but not judgmental questions, but questions like, oh, what is your name? Well, what could I call you? That's good. We need to know, it is go, step forward. And I think that, once we get past that, that first step, the second steps will follow. And it's, learning from each other and being with the kids that I work with. Oh my gosh, I learned every single day something new. And it's, you know, you step inside a classroom, go along. It's wonderful.
I also
Yeah,
exactly,
never boring.
It
if I
just
just add
Yeah.
one more thing from what Jody said, that that's something that we are oftentimes afraid to do. We are afraid to ask the person. So there is this phrase that we constantly use, nothing about me without me. When it comes to children with challenges, when it comes to people with disabilities, nothing about me without me. Don't make assumptions from me. Just because I am visually impaired or I am blind, it doesn't mean you have to constantly hold me by the elbow and usher me around. Don't do it. I got a very, very big learning when I was in Minnesota, when one of my friends from Kazakhstan, who was blind, I we were out at the on the road, and we were just getting into a space for a meeting. And so she was coming out of the car, out of the vehicle, and I went to help her, and she did this, and I said, oops. And she said, Manjushri, never help unless you have asked the person. I said, I'm so sorry, because I have not really interacted much with people with visual impairment and with blindness. So she said, don't ever do that, because you must ask, you must have the respect to ask a person whether they need what they need, or they can be addressed in a certain way. So yes, Jody has put in a very valuable point there. where we really need to get out there and be able to be comfortable asking a person with disabilities things about their disabilities as well. I mean, why not? It's okay. Talk to them. Don't behave like they don't exist in the room or that their disability doesn't exist at all. Even that's so unfair.
Yeah.
There's also that thing about like a lot of people, especially in this community, think that this child is different, this child is less.
Ah,
You ever notice that? Like, and then sometimes other parents say, "Oh, don't play with this kid. Just forget about it." And then a lot of people extend that to like all the members of the family, and then the whole family is excluded. So just to say that just because a child has a disability, they are not their disability. Like you said in that brilliant picture, "Call me Joe." Like even as a parent, I've been guilty of this. Like my husband once said, all you see when you look at our son is the autism. This was before my own diagnosis. So then I said, oh, do I actually do that? And when I thought about it, I'm like, no, like he is himself. His name's Aiden. So like his name is Aiden. He is Aiden. And going on my own journey through this, like autism is just a part of me. It's just who I am. It makes me unique. It's like an individual. And autism is a spectrum. We're all different. So if people could just realize that we are not what we appear on the outside, we are not defined by a label. And then just to see that, how can I help you? How can I support you? If we could all be like that, that would be amazing. And I also wanted to let moms know, like, as a mom before I had my own diagnosis, I thought, what did I do wrong? I went back to thinking about my delivery, and did I feed him formula, or did I breastfeed my son? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, you did nothing wrong. Like, I'm going to look at the camera and tell moms, dads, you did nothing wrong. And one time I met one lady at my son's preschool, and she said she couldn't tell her in-laws because she thought if she went back to India, they would like harm her physically. So like, and then I'm so blessed because I remember my mother-in-law is amazing, and my husband was born with like a physical disability. And I remember after we told them the diagnosis, she called, and like I was lying in my bed, I was really upset, and she said, I want to tell you something. It is not your fault. You did nothing wrong, and all you can do now is to know that your child is your child and help him be an amazing human being. And to their credit, my husband is a doctor and amazing and kind and loving. So we are trying as parents to do the same thing that they did and emulate what they've done with my husband and try that with our son. And so far it's working. So he's a
wow.
great kid. Like
Wow.
helped my husband
That's
unload the dishwasher, and he was totally like there to help. Like he was putting the plates away, the cups away. Jody's so happy because he's so helpful. Yeah.
Yay.
that's such a, yeah, that's such a nice thing that you said, Feroza. I think this is a good end or a conclusion to our discussion. Thank you so much, Manjushri, Jodi, and Feroza. I think we had a rich discussion, and so many important points came out of this. And I learned so many new terms that I'm going to start using. First of all, it doesn't matter what label we use, because label is necessary to get the diagnosis. So when we go to a medical doctor and when they say you have arthritis or you have cancer or you have some other issue, only when they label it we feel relief, right? That we feel, oh, now I know what it was, why I was feeling that. So same thing we should apply to this. When we should take our child for evaluation, and if they have a diagnosis, we should use it to get help for the child, because once they have a label, they know what help to provide, what services to provide, what the school can do, or what other intervention they can provide from outside. And as Firoza pointed out, it not only gives relief, but it makes you more functional. It knows what can you do as a parent. So education, self-awareness, and having the right attitude is most important. And that applies not only to you as somebody who is raising a child with special needs, but that is something you can talk to your family members, to your friends, and let them know how can they be supportive, because they are totally ignorant about how to behave around you. So that is also important. So I So I think what we did here today was just the starting of the conversation. We want people to take this topic and think about it and start the conversation in their own homes with their own kids and with their family members as well as their friends. So we create more awareness, and that this stigma around this topic of special education or special needs child starts to wither away. So thank you so much, Manjushri, Jodi, and Feroza for joining us on this journey. And I'm very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.